This is a film made by Bill Cowell in 1967 before the trip to Mawson. So, taken on the roof of the 568 St Kilda Road, overlooking Albert Park Lake there, with the Amari flag flying on the top of the building. This is the helicopters that were going on the ship tours, coming in to land on the back of the helicopter deck in the Yarra River at North Wharf. These are shots of the crowd on the wharf saying farewell to the ship. I'm not sure who he gave the camera to, but they pan across the crowd there. The Bill's in the middle of that shot. And there's being farewelled by the politician. This is some of the people standing around the helicopters anchored down onto the deck. There's more shots of the expeditioners there. There's the people on the wharf that before the ship sailed, that whoever had the camera, Bill had given the camera to. This is the crowd on the wharf from the ship as we're sailing, and all the streamers there that's on North Wharf. There's Blue McDonald in the middle there. Some people saying farewell there. The ship's pulling away from the wharf now, going down the Yarra River there. This is when we eventually arrived at the pack ice, and these are the first penguins that we'd seen. The helicopters were on the back of the deck, and the mechanic was revving it up to test the engine, and the wind blew it off the side of the ship. Fortunately, it was caught in a net on the side, and they used the ship's crane to lift it back onto the helicopter deck. While we were stuck in the pack ice, there was a pool of water beside the ship, and these seals came up through this pool of water and were playing about there. The first seals that we'd seen, so we were quite interested in seeing what they were doing. The weather observers would put some targets on this balloon that they let go to see if the ship's radar could track the weather balloon to see which direction the wind was blowing. This is while we're sitting in the ice, there's a sunset with the sun on this big iceberg not far away. There's just some of the pressure ridges in the ice flows that are bumped together there while we're jammed in the ice. And Bill's gone for a fly in the helicopter now. They were testing them out, but they couldn't go very far because they didn't have any floats on them. It's sailing around the Narrated stuck in the pack ice. They took everybody up in the helicopter for a joyride there to give them a bit of flying time. while we were stuck in the ice for quite a while, we were able to get off. These people were going over to investigate the couple of penguins that were hanging around, but they didn't appreciate the approaches there. They weren't very happy with the strangers. There's a layer of snow all over the ice there that the guy keeps stepping through there. You're not allowed to do that sort of thing these days. You've got to let them come up to you rather than you approach the wildlife down there. The ice was quite thick there. We were able to get out and wander around quite a bit and practice some skiing on the ice floes around the ship. And there's a rather large ice floe near the ship, and they were able to go out and have a game of football on it. Harassing a seal that had come up on somewhere near the ship. All very no-no these days. For something to do, we made a large kite that was flying for quite a while there. Eventually an American icebreaker came to dig us out of the ice, but we'd already popped out. But he was trying to take us into Wilkes, where we had a crew of workers that were supposed to work there, and a lot of building equipment to build the new station, but the ice was too thick and we couldn't keep up with the American ship as it pushed its way through the ice. So we went back out into the sea. He went into Wilkes to beat the Narrated. This is the Don Stiles, the voyage leader, going up to talk to the captain of the American ship. Eventually we got around. This was our first view of Mawson when we pulled up in Horseshoe Harbour. This is the rocky outcrop where they built the Mawson Station in 1954. These are the expeditions that have been there all year waiting to get their mail there. It's a fuel farm where the fuel for the year is stored. This was the aircraft hangar that was built in 1956 to house the couple of aircraft that they had before they were all wrecked. There's a transmitter hut right at the end. This is the duck was prepared to go ashore there, but then the blizzards came up and we weren't able to work for a few days. After the weather cleared up, the operations began unloading the shore, and the helicopters were used to fly the surveyors out to the mountain tops where they were doing some work. And they took Bill for a fly in the helicopter around, looking at what the station looks like from the air. There are all the huts and the ship in the harbour. drums of fuel for the helicopter there. So it's another helicopter bringing its passengers back. Now it's the ship leaving Mawson on its way back to Australia. It left us there for the year. There's some pups that had been born not long ago before we arrived that were kept in a box outside the electrician's shop. One of the person took the tractor on its way up and drove over a melt lake, and the D4 tractor sank into the melt lake. These other tractors were trying to pull it out. This is the Anari's Volkswagen on its way up to Fishernunatak. The people driven up there. That's a crevasse that was on the way that they stopped to have a look at. That was the Volkswagen. That one, the other Volkswagen was Mark Forecast, took his own vehicle down there for the year. That was the rural up on Fishernunatak, looking at a view around the. It's back out to the sea from Fishernunatak. It's about 20 miles away. That's Bill sliding down the slope there. We gave someone the camera there. That we went up to go skiing there, but the snow was too hard. It was like concrete and you couldn't ski properly. But they just slid around on the ice, having a bit of fun this way. Not sure who these people were doing this. That was Sid Little, one of the electricians that was there. This was on another trip out to the mountain range at Rumdoodle, where they had a caravan parked up there, where the aircraft had been anchored down there back in the early 60s before they blew away and were wrecked. All these rocks had fallen down off the mountains at the time and rolled out onto the ice that was slowly moving down to the sea. It'd be thousands of years before they get dropped into the sea. It's a dog trip that Bill went on down to Proclamation Point, where Mawson had landed there many years ago. The dog sleds there beside the island where they'd stopped there. It's in the winter time when the sea had all frozen over and they were able to travel on the sea ice safely. When they got down a bit further, there was a penguin rookery at this penguin rookery was at Taylor Glacier, which was the only group of penguins that nest on land, but there's ice underneath them all the time, and these chicks that had hatched at the time that they got down to Taylor Glacier. There's a creche of the emperor penguin chicks while their parents had gone out fishing for food for them. This is back at Mawson, where the dogs were all tied up on the dog line when they weren't being used for trips out on the sea ice. There's all the snow is built up around the buildings now in the middle of winter. A big snowdrift behind the powerhouse there. All those rough parts of where the tide cracks are, where the sea ice goes up and down. This is out on the the bay coming back into Mawson there, where the dogs are running quickly to get back home. To get away up onto the plateau from Mawson, they had to drag the caravans and the sledges with the supplies on it up a fairly steep slope, and the sledges kept wanting to slide downhill, so they needed to be winched up in some places so the tractor could get on a place where it could get a good grip in the snow, and then winch the caravans or sledges up behind them. This was a daily penguin rookery out on one of the islands not far from Mawson. They'd ridden their motorbikes out there. The penguins had just laid their eggs, and these adelies were standing around airing themselves, and they were wanting them to do something, so someone threw their glove at them to make them have a bit more action. These people are walking back to their motorbikes there, where they'd parked them away from the penguin rookery. That was Bill with the camera on one of the motorbikes. This was an ice yacht that John Gillies built that was sailing around on the harbour, that people were taking it in turns to sail around. We left the ice yacht out on the harbour during the day, and after dinner they go out, and while there was enough daylight, after midwinter they had time to get out but couldn't sail for very long because it was fairly cold. So you came back and gave someone else a turn. It got fairly fast there at times. This is the table that Bill had set up for Christmas dinner there in our mess area where we did our dining all the time. Yeah. This was the crowd in with Father Christmas delivering some presents there. That's John Erskine at the head of the table there. On New Year's Day we had a barbecue out in the open there and when the sea ice had gone, Bill wanted to have a swim, so he gave me the camera to film him while he dived in for a very quick swim. There were some penguins standing around watching them. Eventually the ship arrived to take us home. It pulled up in the harbour and was doing the unloading, and they unloaded the equipment and supplies out in a net that had been lowered into the dock. It also had drums of sand and aggregate for making concrete. These are all the boxes of supplies for the New Year's supplies for the next group of expeditions in 1968. They had this crane set up to be able to lift the cargo nets out of the ducts when they pulled up in the right place. This was the radar dome that was a fiberglass shroud around the radar that tracked the weather balloons when they were let go. This was the balloon filling shed there with the two weathermen running out with a balloon with the radar target underneath that, and the radio sonde that is sending back the information about the height and the temperature and the humidity. One fellow has to run back to the radar and hop in there, but he can't see where the balloon's going, so the other Weather Bureau man runs off to the theodolite in a building, and he tracks it visually and talks to the man in the radar and tells him where to point the radar, so that once the radar can lock onto the radar target, it can track it then. As the ship unloading with a bit of wind springing up there, and it's got the ice, you can see the ice building up on the mooring ropes there, and they've got a big pontoon that they bring some other supplies ashore on. They're bringing in a new tractor they're trying to lower onto the pontoon there, that one of the D4s. Everybody was very filming it to see just what would happen, how and make sure it got ashore without falling into the water. The red boat is the ship's boat that they use for towing the pontoon around. They had to line the tractor up the right way and balance it just right onto the pontoon. Bill was filming this out of the kitchen window, looking over some of the buildings there with the street light there above the building. Bill went on a helicopter flight out to an island where one of the other expeditioners wanted to put a plaque in honour of his fiancée who died while he was away on the trip. They landed on this island and put this little plaque on the island that that's back at some of the dogs were wandering around, the new pups were wandering around the station, but the dogs were killing the penguins and feeding them to the pups. This is our party departing, the last crew going out on the ducks there, saying goodbye. As we sailed out of the harbour, there were a couple of drums of petrol with some oil in them left out there with some gelignite on them to say farewell to us. You can see the drums there on the shore there. There were two lots of them there. That the second one had a bit more oil in it by the look of it. We sailed around to the Amory ice shelf there with us flying in some people, and Bill went into do some cooking for the workers that were on the Amory ice shelf there. This is the edge of the Amory ice shelf there where the ship was stopped for a while, and Bill had to stay there for a couple of days while when they found where the people had set up their camp. And then the helicopter was flying in some building panels to build a building for them that we had pulled down from Mawson, and they were going to erect that there. The caravans all got buried eventually, and they had to live in like troglodytes in the tunnels there until the snow all melted away, and they dug them out in the next summer when the ship came around to take them home. That's inside the van that they were living in at the time, because they didn't have their accommodation set up properly. That was Peter Lockhart, the carpenter, that went out there to help put the buildings back together again. And they drove around in that vehicle there to find another location. Then the ship sailed around to Wilkes, where they were building the new station called Repstadt, and eventually Casey. But this was the balloon filling building that they were building with these prefabricated panels that they bolt together, and they can get them all in the right places. The big platforms there to let them run out into the wind. This has got the curved section into the wind so that they can run out and let the balloon go without it breaking up. These are some of the workers coming ashore from the Narrated that had parked there, and we had to pick up some of the workers that have been there for a few months. They came down on the Narrated. People coming ashore there to do some work around on the new station, help build the new station. They used this track excavator there that had a crane on the back of it there to do a lot of the unloading, but the builder's hoist was jammed up, and they needed the winch on the back of this to be able to pull it back into working order again. This was the buildings that had been built. They're all up on scaffolding, on stilts there, so that the wind could blow the snow underneath the buildings and they wouldn't become buried like they have at Wilkes. they're eventually all connected by a tunnel down on the windward side on the other. This is a road up beside the building, which the snow accumulated on, which they hoped that it wouldn't do, but it did. It's looking across the bay to where Wilkes was on the other. This was the part of the corrugated iron tunnel that was on the side of the building. They're back working on the putting the builder's hoist up there so they can put the roof on the building, on the balloon filling building. And Bill went over to Wilkes. This was the old station that the Americans built in 1957, and it's been buried in snow every winter. It's difficult to get around. They also had these Jamesway huts there with the canvas covers over them where they stored supplies in them. And some of the aerial systems around there was a great tangle and mess of place. That's with the ship out in the harbour there. That's on the way home. So somebody sunbaking out there, and eventually Tasmania came into sight. You could smell the eucalyptus. These are people cleaning themselves up to prepare to go ashore. Tony Jakes with just come out of the shower trying to dry his hair. And Ray Sherrick, there's another Met man there. That's and birds flying down the channel. Some boat was going out to sea there that didn't look very rough, but it made a splash every now and then. And the pilot came out to take the Neladan into Hobart Harbour. They're off after they dropped the pilot off on board so they could steer it in the right place. A lot of it hadn't recovered from a bushfire that they had in 1967 that burned a lot of area around Hobart. The wharf area at Hobart. The Tasman Bridge. There's a welcoming committee on the wharf at Hobart there. We stopped in Hobart for the day and then flew back in the afternoon to Melbourne. There's people catching up with their wives and fiancés there that hadn't seen for a year. And Bill Cowell and Pat Mooney and I took a taxi up to the top of Mount Wellington to have a look at. You could see down into the harbour there. That's the Tasman Bridge across there. You could zoomed right in, you could see the ship tied up in the harbour. That's Pat Mooney, myself, and Bill Cowell on the top of Mount Wellington. Then we went out to the airport. This is going on the runway out of Hobart Airport, heading back for Melbourne. That was the beach at the end of the airport there, and the airstrip there at Hobart. And that's it.